Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a poem, because it's Poetry Thursday, a fun day to talk about the poetry that has interested me or that I want to share with the world. And today's poem is all about the Irish famine in the mid-1800s. I am referring to The Famine Year by Jane Wilde. For those who don't know, Lady Jane Wilde, or as she was known by her pen name Speranza, was an Irish poet who lived throughout the 1800s. She was known for being something of a nationalist, engaging in a lot of activism in regards to the British occupation of Ireland prior to its emancipation, and her talking about independence and all kinds of things like that. Just speaking out about all the injustices and just the general dickery that colonialist Britain was engaging in at the time. This poem is a clear example of that. And what's also interesting is that Jane Wilde, like her name might sound familiar, her last name in particular, and that is because her son was Oscar Wilde, which is fascinating. You seem to have a family of well-regarded writers there. I hadn't really heard of Jane Wilde before, which is unfortunate because this poem really kicks ass, and I'll tell you why when I get to the analysis section. But without further ado, let's talk about the famine year. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. The famine year. Weary men, what reap ye? Golden corn for the stranger. What sow ye? Human corpses that wait for the avenger. Fainting forms, hunger-stricken, what see you in the offing? Stately ships to bear our food away amid the stranger's scoffing. There's a proud array of soldiers, what do they round your door? They guard our master's granaries from the thin hands of the poor. Pale mothers, wherefore weeping? Would to God that we were dead. Our children swoon before us, and we cannot give them bread. Little children, tears are strange upon your infant faces. God meant you but to smile within your mother's soft embraces. Oh, we know not what is smiling, and we know not what is dying. We're hungry, very hungry, and we cannot stop our crying. And some of us grow cold and white, and we know not what it means. But as they lay beside us, we tremble in our dreams. There's a gaunt crowd on the highway. Are ye come to pray to man, with hollow eyes that cannot weep, and for words your faces wan? No, the blood is dead within our veins, and we care not now for life. Let us die hid in the ditches, far from children and from wife. We cannot stay and listen to their raving, famished cries. Bread, 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 and none to still their agonies. We left our infants playing with their dead mother's hand. We left our maidens maddened by the fever's scorching brand. Better maiden, thou wert strangled in thy own dark, twisted tresses. Better infant, thou wert smothered in thy mother's first caresses. We are fainting in our misery, but God will hear our groan. Yet if fellow men desert us, will he hearken from his throne? Accursed are we in our own land, yet toil we still and toil. But the stranger reaps our harvest, the alien owns our soil. O Christ, how have we sinned that on our native plains we perish houseless, naked, starved, with branded brow like Cain's. Dying wearily, with a torture sure and slow, dying as a dog would die by the wayside as we go. One by one they're falling round us, their pale faces to the sky. We've no strength left to dig them graves. There let them lie. The wild bird, if he's stricken, is mourned by the others, but we die in Christian land. We die amid our brothers. In the land which God has given, like a wild beast in his cave, without a tear, a prayer, a shroud, a coffin, or a grave. Ha! But think ye the contortions of each livid face you see will not be read on judgment day by eyes of deity. We are wretches, famished, scorned, human tools to build your pride, but God will take vengeance for the souls of whom Christ died. Now is your hour of pleasure, bask ye in the world's caresses, but our whitening bones against ye will rise as witnesses from the cabins and the ditches in their charred, uncoffined masses, for the angel of the trumpet will know them as he passes. A ghastly, spectral army before the great God will stand and arraign ye as our murderers, the spoilers of our land. And so that was the famine year. In terms of analysis, there is a little bit worth talking about with this poem. I just want to point out how hard it goes and how accusatory it is of the people that at least Lady Jane Wilde and the Irish might consider solely responsible for the mess that is going on in Ireland at the time that she wrote this. In terms of narrative, it's easy to see what Jane Wilde is talking about. She's saying that, what are people sowing? Like they're sowing corn, or are sowing corn, or they're reaping corn, and they're trying to reap potatoes, among other foods, but they're not successful. People in Ireland are starving because of a famine, and there are people overseas, aliens and strangers, who are coming in, taking the land, who are taking the food, and leaving nothing for the Irish. And ultimately, she says that these people will be held to account, if not by the Irish, who are mad and infuriated by all this, then by God, who will hold them responsible in Judgment Day, which is a very furious way to talk about the suffering that other people have inflicted upon you. I think the first thing you have to understand is the historical implications of this poem. She's talking about the famine, which lasted between 1945 and 1952 or so in Ireland. The famine essentially made it difficult for the Irish to grow food, and so many people starved, many people died, many people fled to America, which is why you had a lot of Irish immigration and a lot of pushback to Irish immigration, and a lot of Europe in general starved because they relied on food from the Irish. What a lot of people might not realize is that the British were responsible for this. They owned a lot of the land. The Irish were not allowed to own land and grow what they wished, which might have been better food that could withstand any viruses or bacteria in the soil. And whatever food that they did grow, a lot of it just went back to Britain. That's the pinnacle of colonialism right there. British forcing the Irish to grow food and then giving them very little in return for it. And the Irish often didn't have opportunities beyond farming and whatnot. So, when farming ran out and they didn't have any money, they couldn't rely on other jobs to make ends meet, and so a lot of Irish starved. It was really a kind of genocide because the British didn't really care. They're like, oh, we don't care what's happening to the Irish. They're parasites. And so you often ended up with a lot of sentiment like this. The Irish already weren't happy that they were being colonized by the British, but this made things worse, and it helped fuel the unrest and the nationalist movement that continued and led to the Irish Civil War and the independence and all sorts of things like that. So you understand the historical underlying, and you can understand a lot of what's going on in this poem. But I really like how accusatory Lady Jane Wilde is in this poem. She says, "Weary men, what reap ye? Golden corn for the stranger," saying that they're growing corn for other people. "And what sow ye? Human corpses that wait for the avenger," saying that your actions have consequences and you're going to be judged for that. She later talks about children and how they're starving, and even the maidens aren't doing too well. And as the poem goes on, it gets incredibly more accusatory, incredibly more vengeful. She says, "We are fainting in our misery, but God will hear our groan. Yet if fellow men desert us, will he hearken from his throne?" Kind of saying that God will judge you, but also maybe he's not really paying attention to us, which is unfortunate. And then near the end of the poem, she says, "We are wretches, famished, scorned human tools to build your pride, but God will take vengeance for the souls of whom Christ died. Now is the hour of pleasure, bask ye in the world's caresses, but our whitening bones against ye will rise as witnesses. And talking about like the angel of the trumpet will blow and there will be a vast spectral army coming for you. And basically saying the Irish will not forget what you are doing to them, and you will suffer as we have suffered. And I think that Irish sentiment against the British continues to this day as they continue to cause problems on that island, especially with Ireland and the other island, Ireland, whose name I'm forgetting, but that's slightly more controlled by the British. A lot of problems, and I think this poem highlights the historical implications, but also explains why the Irish might not like the British now as well. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on The Famine Year by Lady Jane Wilde, a pretty wonderful poem that I'm going to link to in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are, or what you have to say about my review here. If there's anything specific that maybe I hadn't touched on, I'd like to hear that as well. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or possibly join the Discord so we can continue the conversation, or people can learn more about Lady Jane Wilde or The Famine Year if they don't already know. But until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and famine-stricken travels. Farewell.